Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Actcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I am a humanoid interface for contact with organic life forms created by the information integration thought entity that governs this galaxy, Soup.
And I'm your cynical narrator protagonist, Renu.
This week, we aren't interested in normal human beings. If any of you are aliens, time travelers, isekai protagonists, or ESPERs, please come see us. That is all. This week, AT stands for August Termination because we'll be talking about the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, which is quite timely for various reasons. One, because this episode was, supposed to come out on the 1st of September, because that is when the Endless Eights arc ends.
Yeah.
But due to some scheduling conflicts, that just didn't end up happening. But that's okay. We have come to you on the first day past August's end, as the August termination. So that's where we are right now. But also because for whatever reason, after like 9 years, a new Haruhi Suzumiya light novel has been announced for release. And
yeah.
people in Japan are doing the Hare Hare Yukai again, and it's really weird.
As is their right.
Yeah, well, before we get into how small and insignificant your human experience is in the face of cosmic horror that is the sheer magnitude of the universe, what have we been up to?
Let's talk about our insignificant human experiences.
Yeah, man.
Well, August has been a lot. I'm very tired, and I it's just like a lot of move and personal stuff. But even just like today, we're supposed to have like a potential adopter lined up for our 3 black foster cats, who are the only ones we have left.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking with this person who had 3 kids, and they wanted to adopt all of the cats, one for each kid.
Oh boy.
And it was all good, and we were all Gucci, and we were supposed to meet today, and then they ghosted us.
Oh no.
And it was so like emotionally draining, right? Because like I was so prepared to I had to like think about the fact that, oh, this is gonna be like the last night that I'm spending with these boys, but they'll be going to a good home, we hope. We're gonna have to vet this person, make sure that, they'll be able to take care of the cats properly, so on and so forth. And then they just never responded today. Like, they were supposed to text us at a certain time to get our address and then come over and meet the cats, and then they never texted us, and then they never responded when we texted them, so they just straight up ghosted us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, aside from trying to get these boys adopted, well, the other problem is that because we're coming up on October, we don't want to adopt them out during October because that's Halloween month, and people do horrible things to black cats during Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we'll see how this goes. I really hope we can find them a home.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, aside from that, there was apparently there was a hurricane, but we were rather unaffected, so that was good. I think that's it.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
Well, so since the last time we've talked, California has entered the sort of annual, at this point, fire season, which gets just a little bit worse every year. This year was especially bad because, well, all of the terrible pandemic that's happening. Basically what happened is we had a freak lightning storm, one the likes of which we have not seen in probably decades. And it was, I mean, I was definitely awake in the middle of the night when it started. It was actually funny.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to put the podcast episode up that week on that Sunday, but then the thunderstorm started rolling in, so I was like, well, I probably shouldn't edit on the off chance that it kind of just fries my entire computer. That would be no Gucci. So, basically, I was like, okay, you know what? I'll take the night off. I'll just put it up next week, which is unfortunate because I know a lot of our episodes have been being delayed for one reason or another. I don't know. Research always takes a little bit longer than we think it does. We have lives outside of the podcast, except for me. I don't. All I do is sit here, consume media, and then podcast. Um, so yeah, but I kind of it's kind of terrible, right? Because the main firefighting force in California, quite a large like kind of supplement to it, if not like really, you could just consider it the main force at this point, is prison labor, which is a point of much contention, right?
Yeah.
Because essentially people are being paid like 2 cents an hour to fight terrible fires, and then
risk their lives and so on.
right, and then once they get out of prison, they're actually barred from being firefighters. That's the law, which is just all kinds of messed up for all kinds of reasons. Luckily, a new bill has been introduced this week that does seek to remedy this by allowing it to. It allows people who work as firefighters in prison to apply for being firefighters after being in prison, and it'll like basically scrub their like prison record, which is really
That's
really
so
nice.
What?
Yeah, as far as kind of penal justice goes, California is one of the less worse in a country that is increasingly much badder. But yeah, I mean, it's like one of those little tiny shining lights in a moment of otherwise everything is awful all the time. But basically, a lot of our fires weren't getting contained really fast, and our air quality was really bad because all of the inmates who don't have sanitation protections and as many rights as other human beings for some inane reason had COVID, right? So because of COVID, we couldn't have the firefighters in the prison do the prison labor, and so our state was burning for quite a long time, and it's still, some of the fires are I think still going. They're not quite as bad anymore, but my goodness, it was not so Gucci a week ago. Like, you couldn't open the doors without just smelling the smoke everywhere.
Oh my god.
And like we live in one of the like less smoky kind of areas, luckily, right?
Yeah.
We were in this like tiny pocket of like decent enough air, and even we were kind of like, we could smell the smoke outside, like it was somebody was like setting up a wooden campfire like pretty close by. Yeah, so that was no Gucci, and luckily it's a little bit more under control now. But obviously we should still be concerned because, well, we're only just entering fire season. Yeah, we don't have winter. We have summer, and then we have fire season, and then we have less summer, and then we have spring.
I feel that if you replaced fire season with hurricane season, that's us.
Yeah. So, every place has their kind of natural disasters. Traditionally, ours has been earthquakes, but now we also have to worry about terrible wildfires ravaging everything.
Yeah, why not a twofer?
Yeah, just a two for one. Just a fun 2-for-1. Yeah. Aside from that, like nothing else really that exciting. I am and this is somewhat inadvisable. This is kind of one of those like do as I say, not as I do moments, but I am going on a trip, a small retreat to a cabin in the woods with some friends of mine. That does sound irresponsible when I say it, like just kind of like that, but rest assured, we are definitely all COVID free. And I just need to be out of this house, like one cannot live with their parents forever in kind of like in a a continuous line of existence, right? You need breaks, and
I mean,
if the
I
disease
imagine you
doesn't...
guys have all been responsibly social distancing and
quarantining
up until this point.
I don't go outside.
Right,
I don't go outside,
there's not
and
much
I've been
need
tested.
to worry. Right.
Yeah. So, anyway, so we're gonna retreat to the woods for a week, and that's honestly gonna be so good for my mental state, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta take care of your physical health and your mental health. So
yeah. Other than that, I've just been getting some work done, getting some freelancing stuff done. I'm still working on that Patreon stuff. I don't know. Every time I like look at, every time I look at like the essay that I've been writing up to post on Patreon, like more pops into my brain, and I'm like, oh, I gotta write more. There's more things to write, and sometimes you just have to be done with something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like, I mean, writing. I imagine that process is quite similar to the artistic process, in which you can always keep cracking away at it, but eventually you just have to call it done and move on to something else.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm at life wise. I don't know. This segment is always a little bit funny when we're kind of in the middle of not being able to go outside, really, and it's just like there's even less happening in our lives than normal. Like somehow there's less happening and also more happening. It's actually kind of amazing. Like it's more that's happening, or at the very, it's less that takes up more, and none of it is interesting to talk about, right? It's like I sat inside and I did some work, and yeah, it's not that interesting. Although I did, I think you'll be quite proud of me that for the last week I have been sleeping at normal human being hours. I have been
That's
going.
That's so classy.
Yeah. So I've been going to bed like, well, really it varies, but when I just kind of lie down when I'm tired. But I've been going to bed anywhere from like 8 to 12 p.m. or well, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. I suppose. You should say. And then I wake up at like 7 or 8 in the morning, and then I just get up and I just do some stuff.
I have noticed you being online at the same time as me, and I was very surprised. And I was like, either this fool stayed up all night, or they actually slept at a reasonable time.
Right. And it's a little bit of, you know, a little bit of A, a little bit of B, because now that my friend has sort of started a Minecraft server up again, it's just gonna go to shit. Yeah, it's gonna go.
I have to talk with your friend.
Talk in the way that a Yakuza talks to somebody.
We're all above board here.
Anyway, so yeah, that's it. Nothing aside from that. It's been really weird actually going to sleep and waking up at a normal time, because it means, I don't know what it is. I think it's because in the morning time, none of my friends are awake, so I just get more work done.
How about that?
There's always that temptation when somebody's like, "Hey, you want to play some video games?" I'm like, "Yeah, I could play some video games," and you should never accept that offer. At least not when you have work to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we talk about the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya?
Heck yes, at last.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming. This podcast episode has been in the works for about a year, because last year I realized, wait, what if we released an episode about Haruhi Suzumiya right as the Endless Eights arc would have ended? And it was already too late by that point, so I saved it for this year, and it took us forever to watch through all of it. And, you know, to be honest, like I kind of didn't watch the last like 20 minutes of the movie because I, you know, just didn't have time to. Which is rare.
For 100% transparency, I might have watched parts of the movie at 2 times speed to to make sure that I was finished before the podcast.
That's very fair. Luckily for me, I have the gist of the movie kind of ingrained into my like frontal lobe. It has been some time since I've watched it. I think that movie came out in like 2010 or 2011.
Yes,
and
2010. Mm-hmm.
I watched it when it came out, like when it was first sort of fan subbed, because, you know, it was impossible to get anime back then. And I don't think I've watched it since. I don't think I've watched Haruhi since.
Wow.
Since like 2008 or like 9, which is
wow. So it's been a decade for you.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous when I think about it. I'm like, that was a long time. Like, I haven't rewatched it since then. Like, I'm almost certain that I haven't.
Right. And now we got the timeliness of the new book coming out, so it's coming back around for you, man.
Nature is healing. I'm part of Haruhi Suzumiya again. No, I mean, it is, before we get into it, like, Haruhi Suzumiya means a lot to me as a sort of series, because it was one of the first, like, anime sort of things that I really got into outside of kind of what I saw on television, right? You know, outside of your like Naruto's and your Triguns. Like, not to say that isn't, but like it was one of the more esoteric shows that I watched, at the very least at the time, for a Western audience, quite esoteric.
Yeah, very different.
As a Which is funny because like Haruhi Suzumiya is probably one of the sort of generational hallmarks when I really think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't the first school anime by any stretch of the imagination, nor was it the first that did anything of its kind, but it really marks this period where anime became something else that was more like Haruhi than not, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, that's always been very interesting to me, kind of on a meta layer about what Haruhi meant historically in the context of anime. But to me personally, like I have a lot of sort of feelings wrapped around it because it was in a sense kind of what got me into anime as a larger medium.
All right.
Past just what I was yeah, I was like, this is what anime can be? Wild. Right? Like it was the first time that an anime was just like, can you use your brain a little bit for me? Just a little bit, right? I was like,
Yeah.
what?
Whoa.
Yeah. But before we get into that, like let's I'll read you this little blurb that I wrote up that that will go through what Haruhi Suzumiya is for those of you who are not necessarily in the know or maybe who just want a refresher. So,
Yeah.
The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya was originally a light novel series written by Nagaru Tanegawa and illustrated by Noizi Ito. It was published in 2003 by Kadokawa Shoten, and it follows the adventures of Kyon, a normal high school boy, as he contends with the secret life of espers, aliens, and time travelers, all revolving around the godlike power of Haruhi Suzumiya, unbeknownst to her. So she doesn't know. Bored of her daily life, she sets out to find all the supernatural existences and play with them by forming the SOS Brigade, unwittingly dragging in the very entity she's looking for. The anime was adapted in 2006 by Kyoto Animation, and they ran for 2 seasons and a movie. And that's it, actually. The movie came out in like 2010, 2011, and we just never got a 3rd season, even though there is more Haruhi. And obviously we'll talk about kind of the adaptation. But yeah. It's kind of wild because there's like a lot more Haruhi too, and it wasn't really adapted into anything that wasn't a light novel. Yeah. Or at the very least, like I think it might have been adapted into manga, but like the kind of period where that would have been scanlated has like long since passed. And I think because I think Yen Press licenses, like 7 Seas or like Yen Press or something, licenses the light novels in English. I'm very curious. I really want to check them out, to be honest. Yeah. So let's talk about it, right? Because Haruhi Suzumiya is the light novel. This is very important to talk about in the context of anime and anime trends and like what anime is. But like before Haruhi Suzumiya, there were light novels, they existed, but they were nowhere near as explosively popular as they are now, right? Like if you look now, I bet 80% of anime is adapted from light novels. Like it's probably 80% light novels, 10% manga, usually really popular manga, and then like 10% original stuff, right?
Right.
And the thing about it is, like, there's kind of a subcategory that has tangented off of light novels of the web novel, which is like a light novel, except it's not published. It is published, but not in a traditional sense. It's posted on the internet. It's like if somebody trolled through AO3 and was like, okay, I'm gonna turn this fanfiction into a movie, right? But like but web novels is where all of the isekais come from. So in a way, Haruhi is responsible for the isekai. But there, but like I mean, honestly, as a kind of light novel, it was very very formative in the trend of what light novels are and continue to be. Right, the DNA of Haruhi Suzumiya is kind of felt all over the weebdom.
Oh yeah.
As a as we kind of understand it, right?
Yep.
There's obviously the kind of narrator commentator role that we see a lot where light novels, I don't know if you've ever read a light novel, Renu, but like translated or officially or not, but like there are a lot of like first person perspective and somebody just thinking to themselves and interpreting the things that are happening. And obviously the reason for that is Haruhi Suzumiya, which is interesting because I think in a lot of ways, many light novels don't necessarily need to be like that. But Haruhi is done that way for a very specific reason, at least in my opinion. It's interesting to me because Haruhi Suzumiya was the light novel. It essentially started the popular industry that continues to be one of the most powerful driving forces behind anime right now, right?
Right. They're so prolific nowadays that you don't think about the fact that 10 years ago that wasn't really the case until this anime came out.
Yeah. And I like it too because when you track sort of popular trends like that, you can kind of get a glimpse into what that era was like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the thing about Haruhi is that it's not just because it was a light novel that it was popular. It's because Haruhi was a light novel that light novels became popular. And the thing about Haruhi is that it thematically is about very specific things that I think are very, very resonant with an Japanese audience at that time. Like when you look at Western media now, a lot of it is superhero fiction and superhero media, right?
Yes.
Like Marvel and Disney as a sort of byproduct of that makes so much money. They make so much money off of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they keep pumping these movies out. But people keep watching them, right? And I think it tells us something about what we as audiences want out of our fiction, where kind of and this is like I talked about this a little bit when or I suppose I talked about it a lot when we talked about the last time we talked about My Hero Academia. But the thing about superhero fiction and Hiroaka specifically, but Marvel movies definitely as well, like they are reproductions of state violence, but also like they're about like exceptional individuals leading you out of dark times and protecting you. And in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, oftentimes like extra legally, right? Like there's an entire conflict in the sort of first like quote unquote arc of the Marvel movies about what is the role of a superhero in society? Should they be bound by governmental regulations? And it's interesting because like Iron Man is like Mr. I'm going to bomb Afghanistan. Iron Man was like maybe we should let there be regulations on superheroes, and Captain America is like, no, there shouldn't be because we're exceptional individuals. And it's funny because that is like a very fascist tendency that we see a lot of nowadays, where people don't really care about thinking for themselves or listening to other perspectives. Like they care about being on the winning side, about having somebody who is strong enough to protect you from the evil that is out there. So that's interesting to me about why like superhero fiction is so popular right now, right?
Right.
And at the same time, Haruhi Suzumiya I think is very popular in that time because of many of the same reasons that Eva was popular, right? Like it has a lot to do with existentialism and this kind of cosmic horror about living in society and being a human being that exists in a terrible, cold universe that doesn't care about you. There's a lot about Haruhi that's actually very interestingly about nihilism. Yeah, but I don't know. Before we kind of really sort of deeper dive into that, I would really love to know your thoughts about it. As I don't know if you've ever watched it before, or but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, yeah. So for Haruhi Suzumiya, I was obviously aware of the explosion that it had within the anime community, but from the outside looking in, it just didn't seem like the kind of anime that I was really into at the time. Probably around that time, I was watching stuff like Sigh Yuki and other stuff like that. Like it's more action oriented, shonen stuff like that was coming out at that time. So I just kind of ended up missing the entire wave of it. And so at the most I had only seen, clips and of course the ending, which was so famous. And then, so this was the first time that I actually watched it all the way through, like beginning to end, and then the movie as well. And it was so different from the impression that I had gotten when I was younger. And I had wished someone had just told me what it was about, or I had just, in my teenage brain had gone out of my way to look it up for myself.
Right.
Because the premise itself is so interesting, and I think would have really been up my alley, but I don't know, I just didn't get into it.
It's okay, Renu. That was me with Ava, so we traded.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, I didn't get into Ava back then either, and now here we are.
Yeah, now here we are with an entire podcast about Neon Genesis Evangelion. Hideaki Anno's wild ride. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was really interesting, and I could it was fun, I guess, seeing it now in, I guess, quote unquote hindsight, like being able to track all of its influences, like, okay, so this is where this kind of trend came from, and this is why people do this in the anime community, like that kind of stuff that I never really, like, for sure knew about. Like, I would be able to guess that, maybe it came from this anime, but I didn't know for sure until now. And so it's basically just that general feeling of you see something that was really influential and famous for the first time, and then you're able to, in hindsight, go back and see what kind of effects it had. Like nowadays, if this were to come out, it might seem a bit cliche or whatever, but that's because it was the one that started it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Did you have a I don't know, like did you have a favorite moment? I suppose I should ask, like, a favorite moment, favorite character, that sort of stuff.
I'm also weak for Nagato Yuki.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
Good lord.
Of course,
like,
of course.
For sure, the most, I don't know, something about her character feels just right, in terms of what I prefer out of, I don't know, a story.
Yeah,
I guess
everything just kind of locks
seeing
into
her
place.
very gradual growth and progression in her character. I didn't sense that nearly as much with like Koizumi, for example, or Mikuru. Like, I feel like Nagato was such a special character in her own in this series.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there, right? Like, I think that Nagato has maybe the most complex character in the entire series.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be an understatement to say. Like, obviously Haruhi is the centerpiece, and the other characters have certain, little things about them, and the main character we get to sort of roll around in his mind a lot. But I think of all of the characters, Nagato is the one that is the most characterized, and the most the one that has kind of the most recognizable arc, I suppose you should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm weak for Yuki Nagato. I mean, that's not even funny, right? It's like Nagata Yuki was one of those characters that you, like, see on screen, and it's a formative experience. You're like, oh no, right? And I think this is interesting, right? Because Yuki Nagato is basically like if Rei was more of a character in Ava.
Yes, I agree. If Rei had more of a presence in the anime, then she and Nagato would overlap even more than they already do.
Yeah.
Like now they overlap in the sense of that they're both kind of alien entities. They kind of see the human species as something different from them, and so they take a slightly more observer-like role in the story. But the fine-tunings of their characters is a bit different because of their interactions with the protagonist are slightly different. But there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between them.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ava, and let's talk about, like, the sort of look of it, right? The production of it.
Yeah.
Before we kind of roll into themes, it is so funny to me how many shots in this anime are, like, just direct homages to Ava. There's so many. Like, I think there's at least 3 different elevator scenes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, all of the elevator scenes, the poolside scenes with Nagato specifically was just like they positioned her just like they did with Rei and Ava as well. And I was like, oh my god, here we go.
Yeah, it's very funny because like all of
Yeah.
that doesn't exist in the light novel, right? This is stuff that is I mean, it obviously couldn't, right?
Right.
So like
right.
these are directing choices made by the anime staff, and I think as far as an anime adaptation goes, Haruhi is like probably one of the best. Given all of the circumstances surrounding it, the fact that they never got a third season sort of greenlit for various reasons, part of which we'll sort of touch on, because you know that there's a big sort of elephant in the room there's a big August-shaped elephant in the room that we will get to, I promise. But yeah, so they were never greenlit for a season 3, but they did have the movie, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, and
Yeah.
they end it in such a way that the anime is complete, right?
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
way more light novel, but none of it matters to the anime, which is, I mean, obviously to a younger me, this was just like treasonous. This was terrible and tragic. I really wanted more Haruhi because, you know, when and this was, God, man. Sometimes I really think about like how far I've become a jaded human being, because like, you know, back when I would like binge an anime season in like a day, and then I would be like, but I want more anime. I want to live in this world a little longer. And that is a feeling I get so rarely nowadays. Like I honestly do feel it again with Haruhi to some extent. I feel it a lot with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood when I go back and watch that again. But very, very few anime I watch nowadays, I like watch all the way through and I'm like, man, I really could just go back and start from episode 1 again.
Right, yeah.
But yeah. The anime is gorgeous, actually. And
Yeah.
I really didn't think it would hold up as much as it did, and I suppose I shouldn't be as surprised because it's done by Kyoto Animation, and it's one of their kind of I would say one of their most famous works.
Yeah, I would say the era that this came out in, you know, the early 2000s till 2010, I had a couple of works like this that had animation that was just really, like, even if it was you know, you could tell where they might have saved budget here and there. The animation holds up even when we watch it now. Like, we watched Toradora for the podcast last year, and there was a lot of animation in there that held up, even though you could very clearly tell it was from the early 2000s.
You can definitely see the seams in Toradora specifically.
Yes.
And it does work, as I've said, in the show's favor. But Haruhi just, like, is really solid all around. Like, Kyoto Animation really just knocks it out of the park every single time.
They're a very solid animation company for sure.
Everything about it is so good. And like I explained this to you while we were watching the Endless Eights arc together, which, by the way, if you want to suffer with us, there will be an episode, there will be a little bonus for all you patrons where you can watch us watch the entirety of Endless Eights together. But yes, anyway, back to the point. So it really holds up. It actually really does. Like, the directing is very snappy and interesting, and there's almost never like a boring shot, right? There's a lot of like kind of plain or non-moving shots, but overall the direction is really solid, and the animation and the polish and the background, even the kind of overblown like exposure filters that they put on sometimes, all of it really gives Haruhi as a show, as like a visual piece, a very strong sense of place in this idealized high school world, right?
Yeah, it's very competent, and if you ever have any question about what we might be talking about, just watch the episode where they go over the entirety of the school movie that they produced, because even the fact that they were able to produce a school movie, like just the fact that it was so spot on shows how good they are at animation.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That they were able to replicate all these angles that a student production might have that are terrible, or all these different kinds of mistakes that you might make as an amateur filmmaker. Like, I was just I was laughing throughout the whole episode because it was so good. I was like, yes, that is how it is when you're recording like a high school movie. And if you see that in juxtaposition to how the rest of the animation is, you can see, okay, so this is how a professional animation company does things versus like, you know, a beginner.
Right. Well, that was my favorite thing about the voice acting in that episode, which was it's purposefully bad.
Yes, it's so wonderful because you know that these voice actors know how to act, but they're putting it on for the school production.
Yeah, right. It's so funny to hear voice actors who are playing characters who are playing characters in a student-made film, pretending to be bad at acting. That's really great acting, honestly. it was. I love everything about that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, the attention to detail is actually pretty impressive all the way through. Like, I know Kyoto Animation is like really well known for their polish, right? Because I don't know if this was the case when Haruhi came out, but it's kind of a weird anomalous studio in the fact that they tend to make all of their anime at once and then release the season, as opposed to animation studios that just make it sort of week by week. They usually obviously have a couple episodes, you know, surplus, but we can see the seams of that when something like COVID-19 happens and we don't get anime episodes. Like, we don't get the end of a season because they just couldn't put it together, right?
Right.
And I don't know. It's interesting because Kyoto Animation is really the sort of shining beacon of what anime studios should strive to be, right? Like, you know, treat your workers fairly, make sure they have good work-life balance, and don't have this huge crunch to make money. And it's kind of sad because, like, Q&A does certainly work to some extent, right? But like, anime kind of as an industry is very hostile to these things, and it's kind of no wonder that, like, a lot of shows we get are just kind of like, well, this is just checking some boxes, right? Like,
right, yeah. And it's such a shame that despite the fact that KyoAni is so, like, part of their company philosophy is making sure that ideas are new and fresh, and they're always hiring, like, new graduates and stuff like that. They are shunned for it almost,
right?
In comparison to the rest of the anime industry.
Like, it's such an anomalous studio, and I mean, it's unfortunate, but, like, they still definitely put out some of the best work, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, Haruhi Suzumiya is, like, really great on the rewatch. Like, actually, if you pay attention to like what the angles of the camera are, and like where the sort of eye is supposed to be drawn, if you pay attention to the lighting in this show, I promise you will learn something about how lighting sets mood, right? there is this amazing kind of like there's almost no neutral lighting. Like, I talk about this when we were watching Endless Eighth, but there's almost no neutral lighting in the show. It's all like natural, quote unquote, right? It's
yes,
they animate it, but like it's natural lighting. So like you have the kind of like almost too bright light of like daytime, especially in summertime when it's like it's almost making everything a little bit hazy. You have this kind of like dark green kind of color at nighttime because that's what color the lamps are, and that's like the only light you're getting is this like weird artificial kind of green light, and like you're holding a scene about like this serious meeting about like, oh, we're stuck in a time loop, right? Like, we actually have to talk about this. And then you have for instance, when Kyon initially gets told that Nagato is an alien, that lighting is so harsh and artificial, and like it's kind of washed out, and you're like really sterile and uncomfortable because like that's it, like it's kind of this like weird world-shattering event where like nothing makes sense anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, everything about it is so strong in setting the tone of the scene you're about to watch. It's
right.
It's funny because like I talk about lighting a lot, right? Because I notice it when the lighting is good, and I never realized how good the lighting is in Haruhi
Yeah, I mean,
Suzumiya.
we talked about it in the badminton anime, where the lighting in that anime was so stunning, in addition to the actual rotoscoping of the matches. But
right,
we were, people notice when you pay attention to the lighting, and it's not just that generic neutral lighting. People notice,
Right.
and it adds a lot more to the. It makes the atmosphere.
It's one of, I think, the strongest points that makes Haruhi feel so real as kind of a thing, where when I think about a lot of anime, obviously a lot of it is just kind of like, oh, like this is just fantasy, or this is just sci-fi or whatever, right? But when I think about Haruhi Suzumiya, it takes a very physical place in my brain. Like, it kind of sets up shop there. And like a large part of that to me is definitely the lighting, right? And it's like, I cannot overstate how important it is for that kind of for an anime specifically to tell you that kind of information, right? It's like background music, where the background music is setting the tone, it's setting your expectations for the scene that's about to follow. So it's very, very important in a visual medium for your visual to like have the kind of like right mindset, right?
Right.
So kudos
Yep.
to Haruhi Suzumiya's production, because it's quite stellar. Honestly, it definitely still holds. Like, there's definitely like there's an episode or two with some CG in it, but even that's not that bad because it's meant to be
no,
kind of...
the CG was never egregious for me.
Yeah.
Even if it seemed a bit dated, I was fine with it because they used it so minimally.
Well, they also like, one of the biggest CG moments is when they're inside a computer, and they're in a computer in 2003, which is like, yeah, actually, this is about right for the era, right? Like,
right.
This is appropriate both to the era and to the story it is telling. So
yeah.
Fair enough.
Windows
fair
95. Oh my god, when they booted that up.
Oh my.
Movie.
You just look at it, you're like, oh my.
Yeah, I had to sit back in my chair a little bit. I was like,
yeah, I definitely feel it. And obviously, like, we should have a special shout out to both the music and the voice acting, right?
Yeah.
The music is really good. I think I don't know if I wrote it down anywhere here, but I don't remember who did it. But the music is it's funny because, like, the background music is so different now than it used to be. Like, and that's kind of stating the obvious, right? But, like, do you remember when all anime sounded like it was Persona? Like, there's a very specific era when every background track sounds like it came from, like, a Shoji Meguro, like, ripoff. Or, like, inspired by, right? Like, there's lots of these kind of, like, tinny trumpets that go like, bow, ba 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 ba.
Yep.
And it's noticeable, but it doesn't distract. I don't ever feel like.
No.
It's a lot more noticeable though than a lot of background music that is kind of played nowadays, where, like, it's very inconsequential and, like, I don't really notice it. But in Haruhi, I do notice it. Rarely are characters, like, speaking at the same time as the music is, like, blaring. Which is actually, it's funny because this is kind of an issue I have with the movie, which is that I've always thought this, the sound balancing on the movie is so bad. Like, the talking is all really quiet because the movie is pretty somber all around, and then the music is
quiet.
Just super loud.
I
hate
agree.
it when they do this.
Yep. There were times during the movie I was surprised, even though I was listening to it on my speakers, I got surprised by the sound because I was leaning in, listening to the dialogue, and then it'll go completely quiet, and then there's a scene transition, and then suddenly music, and I was like, oh my god, I need to turn the volume back down.
Like, you can tell when something went to theaters and then was never sound balanced for home consumption. This is one of those movies, for sure.
Yes.
To be fair, given the quality that I watched this movie at, it's very possible that it just was sort of never ripped properly, and it was... Anyway, I haven't you know what? I've just decided our next podcast episode is going to be about piracy, because we have to talk about piracy.
Piracy!
Anyway, yeah, moving beyond that, like, the movie looked really good. There was a lot of sort of rotoscope shots, though. You could tell.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't mind it, and the fact is that it looked good.
Well, it looked good, and it also, and I don't know how many times I'm gonna have to say this, but it's appropriate for the tone, because the entire movie is about, like, a more, I guess, grounded reality, and so as a result, the colors are much more muted and dull, and
They
the
are.
animation is a lot. It's a lot smoother, but almost like kind of uncomfortably so because it's like rotoscoped, and you have a lot of these like sort of panning shots. It gives you a like really dizzying sense of reality, where it's like, oh, this is like hyper real. Like I'm watching like a soap opera in 60 FPS real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Why don't we sort of just roll right into talking about the themes, because we're gonna be here probably for a little while. I wrote up a lot 'cause I have
Forever.
a lot of thoughts about it. So let's talk about Haruhi Suzumiya as Sekai K. Sekai K is a sort of subgenre of anime where the relationship between two people is the driving force of events, up to and including world events as metaphor for the relationship. So basically, what happens in the relationship between these, two people is affecting what happens outside in the bigger world. Sometimes it's apocalyptic, sometimes it's not. Eva is considered Sekai K, or prototypically Sekai K. So this was interesting to me, because like Eva, or not Eva, but like Haruhi Suzumiya to me is kind of like not necessarily the archetypical Sekai K, because there are other ones that are more explicit about the whole affair, but this one is also pretty explicit about the whole affair, right? Like the relationship between Kyon and Haruhi is what sort of drives all of the surrounding things that happen, including the sort of like supernatural existence stuff, right?
Yeah, the characters talk about it a lot, especially Koizumi. He's always up
he
Kyon's
spends a lot of
business
time
about
talking
how
about
his
it.
relationship affects Haruhi's abilities, and then that manifests in the world.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to me because Sekai K generally is about coming of age, at least in my experience, right? Much of it has to do with how the relationship between two people affects how they relate to the world itself. Oftentimes that sort of relationship is made literal. That's the sort of defining thing, the defining marker of Sekai K as a genre. But
Yeah.
when you have Haruhi with her godlike powers, it's kind of like less about the literal idea of, well, what if somebody had godlike powers, and more about like what about like young people is it that like makes them so capable of enacting change in the world, right? And there's kind of a level of this where it's coming of age as apocalypticism, right? About the end of everything as you know it and the beginning of something new, which is to say like the end of your childhood and turning into an adult, right? That's kind of a very important theme when you think about apocalypticism. But there is, to me, a very interesting examination of this relationship between two people, how they navigate a world that they're unsatisfied with, and how that affects the world around them, right? This idea of a better world is always imaginable, and you can always take steps towards creating it, even if the entirety of society tells you that it's worthless and that you should give up on it, right? Haruhi Suzumiya is a character that is absolutely obsessed with the supernatural existences because it is both a way to alleviate her existential dread about being a tiny human in a large universe, and is also about how the relationship between a person like that and a person like Kyon, who is so grounded and cynically minded, how those two people interact and change and become adults. Yeah. Well, the thing about Haruhi, right, is that a lot of it is about this line between truth and fiction, and this kind of blurring of reality, about what reality really is, and about how it's kind of a lot more of what you make of it than what people tell you it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me because like there's obviously this like dramatic irony. There's always this dramatic irony of Haruhi Suzumiya never knows and never can know that all of the people that she's gathered around her are the very people that the very sort of entities that she's looking for. She's looking for an Esper, an alien, a time traveler, someone from another world, right? And those are the people around her, the people that she's gathered around her, but she'll never know that, right? So there's this
Right.
kind of like it's almost like a don't take for granted what's around you kind of message about like
Yeah.
the specialness of mundane everyday existence is the relationships with the people around you. And at the same time there's also kind of this like level of like, well, actually, like this stuff does and can exist, and it is up to us to keep believing in it, right? It's like when you become an adult and you still carry the wishes and hopes and dreams of childhood with you, and you don't let that, become something that is squashed by society.
Yeah, I do love that kind of the way I would say probably one of my favorite moments in the anime was when Kyon was literally trying to explain to her
Right.
that her the other SOS Brigade members were, ESPERs and the aliens and time travelers, and she explodes at him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the fact that she's so grounded in reality because she wants to fight reality so much, she has to have a good understanding of it.
right? Like,
And yeah, it's just great to watch.
well, that's like the central thing about the series as a whole,
Yeah.
which is this idea that, as much as Haruhi wishes for these things,
Yep.
she still has a very strong sense of reality. In fact, stronger
Yes.
than probably anybody else. It's the reason
Yeah.
that the world operates as normal, even with these existences that she's,
Mhm.
unaware of. And she might be causing things to happen without her knowing, that might put the entire world in danger. But like Haruhi Suzumiya at the end of the day is more realistic about the situation than anybody else. And it's funny to me because there it is this irony where Kyon, who doesn't believe in this stuff because he's cynical and terrible, is the one who sees the most consistent proof of it happening, right?
Yes.
And that is the kind of way in which the world of Kyon, a sort of cynical-minded adult, and the childlike wonder of Haruhi mix into like two people who have learned from each other and who are going into the world knowing that things can be better, right? And that's like something that's really important right now, right? Like the idea that things can be better. We can imagine a better world for ourselves, and that's like the first step to making that world happen. It is how do I say this? There are quite a couple people out there who are just sort of like, no, better things are not possible. You should stop hoping for that to happen.
Mhm.
And like they are possible, and this is something of interest to me as somebody who studied literature, right? But the sort of transformative potential of literature to do things like change reality, because reality is sort of really at the end of the day what we make of it, right? And
Mhm.
I like it because the opening of the show is it says as much, right? One of the translated lines from the first opening is, "In this world where truth becomes fiction, we become stronger because we have dreams," right?
Yeah.
It's about the importance of maintaining this like hope.
Yeah. And there's also I remember this moment in the I guess it was the movie where Kyon was talking about how his sister is 11 and still believes in Santa, and then Haruhi immediately is just like, "Yo, that's great. Tell her to keep it up."
Right, yeah.
Dreams are so important. Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I like the sort of structure of Haruhi Suzumiya as a narrative device, because it means like when you have the cynical protagonist be the only one who kind of experiences all of the weird stuff that's happening, it also kind of calls into question the narrator himself and whether or not like, and this is actually like very explicit, because in the movie that's literally what happens, right? He gets transported to a universe where all of that stuff never happened, and he's just going around telling people like, but you're from the future. And of course
Mhm.
people would be like, that's so weird. What are you doing? Get away
Yeah.
from me. Stop touching me.
Right, you're a crazy person.
Yeah, like, and it's very funny to me that sort of arc is centered around the idea of like, well, what if Kyon was just sort of making the whole making it all up?
I do
Um,
like that. He has that moment towards the end of the movie where he has to confront himself and be like, be honest with himself for once, and
right.
own up to the fact that he does actually like the fact that he gets dragged around by Haruhi on these crazy adventures because it's fun.
Well, that's that's what I love though, right? About
Yeah,
the sort of end of the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, and also like that as a kind of end, like a bookmark end, right? Like a
yeah,
bookend
mm-hmm,
to the
yep,
entire series. Like that's
yep,
why I really don't feel like there needs to be more anime, because
yeah,
that's such a perfect way to sort of wrap it around. Like obviously, it does the time travel shenanigans where like we revisit the 3 years ago Tanabata, and we have another sort of layer of time travel going on, and all that sort of stuff is interesting, of course. Um, but then at the end of it, when he has to confront himself, it's like, well, it is more fun that way, right? It's more fun to be in that place where things are happening, and I'm tired every day because somebody is just like yanking me around. But at the same time, that's like the fun of being a teenager, and the fun of youth, and like in a very interesting way, going back to the world that is full of supernatural things is more mundane than not. And it is it is one of these very interesting like central tenets of Haruhi Suzumiya that was very, very formative for me when I watched it the first time, back when I was like 13 or whatever, right? Like the idea that there is something special about the mundane, like the
yeah.
idea that everyday life and the relationships that you have with people and the things that you do with them are special in the moment because they happen and then they're gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny to me that like the like again the supernatural existences are mundane things, and Haruhi is just hanging out with them. The entire point of the SOS Brigade is to just hang out with supernatural existences, which is what it is. And
Yeah.
right, like even if there were exciting things happening, at the end of the day, they're still just in a club. They're still just kids hanging out, doing, I don't know, whatever bullshit that they're doing as
Right.
kids, right? And it's kind of funny to me, having watched it both like before I entered the sort of like, teenager zone, and after I've left the teenager zone, right? It is very interesting to me, the experience that I had, like
Yeah.
just kind of like revisiting something that was so formative to me growing up, because like when I watched it, I realized how special the mundane was, how special the everyday was, that the things that are happening now are maybe like not ideal, and maybe there's some things I wish were better, but they're special because I'm gonna realize that they're gone before I know it. And it was a large part of me at like 13 years old being like, I don't actually want to grow up faster. Like a lot of people are like, I want to drive, I want to drink alcohol, whatever. But
Yeah.
like from 13 to like now, my entire life has just been spent being like, I could just spend a little bit more time here, to be perfectly honest. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know. There's something like kind of lovely about that, because, and this is, I think, the main sort of thing that I got out of watching Haruhi this time, which is the central theme of it is this idea of your mundane existence being the cure for nihilism, which is so funny when I say it like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Haruhi Suzumiya has very few moments. Like we have very few sort of moments where we get like a very somber, serious Haruhi, and one of them is when she's explained to Kyon just kind of offhand why she believes in aliens and espers and time travelers so hard, or at the very least wishes that they existed, and is searching for them, right? Even if she knows that they don't exist, is because what's the point of a universe where those fun things don't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
The universe is so large and cold and cruel, and what does it mean to not have meaning in that world without those
Right.
things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Haruhi doesn't necessarily believe in God, and the dramatic irony there, of course, is that she is God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she's really grappling with this kind of actually legitimate moment of nihilism, of this like kind of Nietzschean nihilism of what do we do now that God is dead? And
Right.
that is so interesting to me that like one of the most popular light novel slash animes of all time is about nihilism. And to be honest, like yeah, right? Like we're only like like 7 years off of Evangelion at this point, something like that. And
Yeah.
Evangelion is I don't know if it's necessarily about nihilism. It's about other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if
Yeah.
I ever said it was about nihilism. If I did, this oh boy, this is embarrassing, isn't it? But I think Haruhi Suzumiya is so much more about this mundane horror that everybody has to experience at some point in their life, where they're like,
Right.
okay, I'm a human being. You know,
Right.
I think the things around me are pretty important. And then you're like, okay, I'm one human being out of like 3 million that lives in my like state. And then
Right.
out of like 300 million or whatever that lives in my country. And I'm 1 out of 7 billion on a planet. And
Yep.
that planet is a dust speck in the universe compared to the sun. And the sun is a dust speck in the universe compared to the size of the universe itself, which might be expanding forever and it might be empty. Right? We might be alone in the universe. And that kind of like coming to the realization that like, and it's like interesting because like that's one of the only somber moments we get with Haruhi, one of the only serious, quote unquote, serious moments. And it's like such an offhand like throwaway thing that like tells you exactly what the entire series is about, because
Yeah.
Haruhi has to grapple with like, what does it mean to be a human being when I don't have an express purpose? And her answer to that is, well, I'll just make a purpose, right? I will find meaning
Right.
in the things that I do every day. I will hope and dream for greater existences to exist. And by doing so, they do exist. And
Yeah.
she
I
creates
I would
meaning.
say, yeah, exactly. She creates meaning, and I feel like that's probably one of the reasons why this is one of the most wildly successful slice of life anime, is because it brings a whole nother meaning to slice of life. Is that, slice of life anime is about observing people doing their daily, mundane life things, but the fact that it is also in the context of this anime a battle against nihilism, or learning how to accept your nihilistic views and coming to terms with that, but also maybe learning a new point of view that mundane life maybe isn't so bad. I think
Right.
that also is what helps this anime really stand out, or the story really stand out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like the thing though, right? Is that it is a slice of life show slash
Yes.
series slash light novel. Like,
Yeah.
after like a certain point, it really just it's a slice of life. Like most of it's funny because like about 80% of Haruhi Suzumiya is actually just slice of life, and then there's like 20% where like a bunch of cool, exciting stuff happens, and Kyon almost dies because he gets like almost stabbed by an alien, right? And you see like Yuki Nagato doing like cool techno magic and
Yeah.
stuff.
They're
Right?
literally remaking the world and all that, but it is still a slice of life anime.
Yeah. At the end of the day, a lot of it is slice of life, and I don't think that's an accident, right? It is important that is what the bulk of the show is, because it tells you what it's about, right?
Yes.
It tells you what it is. It's the fantasy of slice of life. And this is another thing that I'll get into about the difference between the series and the movie, which is this it's funny because it's actually just like the idealized sort of high school youth slice of life sort of thing. Like what
Right.
really is the fantasy of slice of life, right? It's just enjoying the sort of mundane things that happen around you, just having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Like every kid, I promise you, every kid experiences this moment when the illusion is broken.
Yep.
Like when you realize that Disneyland is fake and you know Santa Claus isn't real. Oops, spoilers.
Don't tell Kyon's sister.
Don't tell Kyon's sister. But like every kid has that moment where they get told by an adult that things aren't real, or they come to the realization all their own by looking at the people around them and what they believe. And they realize that the things that they wanted so strongly, all of the exciting, fun things that happen in fiction that they have been essentially fed since birth, aren't necessarily real. And it takes people a long time. Some people never do, but it takes people a long time to realize that like they do exist because you're experiencing them in the medium that you originally experienced them, right? Like the fantasy is like you're never going to be whisked away to an isekai as much as you wish you were, right? But isekai fiction and the fantasy of being an isekai does exist because you get to watch it in anime. And it's funny because Haruhi Suzumiya does that, but for being an average person that lives an existence every day in a high school, and it was so wildly popular that it basically made all anime for the next 10 years just about school. Right? Like,
for better or for worse.
All the anime that came after that was just about, all right, let's go to school some more.
Yeah.
And the things that happen in school. And all of the sort of responses to that were also about school and youth. And I think it's really important when we look at this in the context of what was it like in 2003 Japan, right? Like this is around the time that like Genshiken is set, and the entirety of Japanese society is becoming disillusioned with the economic boom. And like no wonder, right? No wonder people latched on so strongly to a series that is both about like the idea that exciting things exist out there just outside of our reach, and at the same time is a fantasy about school, this like kind of sacred time when you're allowed to make mistakes and change and be whoever you want to try to be, and you can fail and that's okay. And you're not a part of like, you know, salaryman society. Like, no wonder that was so popular, so explosively, wildly popular at the time. And this is, like, coming off of, like, you know, the sort of disillusionment that already existed with Evangelion, right? This kind of apocalypticism. But it's, like, a very grounded, nihilist, like, introspection that I think, like, is the reason it caught on so like, like, it's so wildly. Like, it clung to people's imaginations because... I mean, because of the things that happen inside of it, right? The things that it even says on the tin. It's like, I wish ESPERs and aliens and time travelers are real, and I bet you do too. And the answer is, of course, overwhelmingly, yes, we wish those things were real. I mean, nothing to say that they aren't. It would be, like,
you just haven't found them yet.
It would be very unlikely for there to just be no other sort of comparable living existence to us in the entire universe. It's so fucking big, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it's it is depressing and terrible, and at the same time is also weirdly hopeful. And I don't know, I think Haruhi Suzumiya is maybe one of like the, and obviously this is colored by my sort of nostalgic attachment to the series, but like it is one of the most important series to me personally because it is about those things, about how important mundane life is and how you can still wish for a better world and how you can create your own meaning in a world that is devoid of it, because that's kind of all we can do. And like fiction is a way that we have of interfacing with that, right? Like when Haruhi Suzumiya is dissatisfied with the world, things happen and things change, and like Kyon and Haruhi end up in an Adam and Eve situation, or you know, Haruhi accidentally almost destroys a city or whatever, right? All of these kinds of things. But as the series continues, those things happen less and less, and they talk about how Haruhi is calming down because she's satisfied with her sort of mundane life, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The fun that she has with her friends every day in the classroom is special enough to satisfy her and to make it so that she isn't as dissatisfied with the world, even if she's still outwardly looking for those things, right? It's like,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm very passionate about this because I really, really like Haruhi Suzumiya. It's interesting because like Haruhi Suzumiya was one of the first anime that I watched where I was just like, I mean, there has to be like more stuff to this, right? And I like found this like weird subculture of like amateur voice actors and voice actresses who played the who kind of like fan fictioned out the like uh gender bended version of the character. It was very odd. Anyway, um YouTube was a very weird place in like 2009, 10.
It still is.
I mean,
TBH.
it still is, but you know, now it's like YouTube is grown so far beyond the like conception of normal human beings, because back then, if somebody had like 1 million subscribers, or if somebody had like 1 million views on a video, you would know about the video. The internet was so small.
Right, yes.
Nowadays, I find people with 40 million subscribers, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? I've never heard
Yeah.
of this person. They've been making
Yep.
videos for 7 months, and they have 40 million subscribers. What? Where am I? Like, what universe am I living in where this is what is happening? Like, and in a weird way, Haruhi Suzumiya kind of harkens back to a time when anime in at least Western spaces was this weird niche thing. Like, there were a lot of people who watched lots of Naruto and all that kind of stuff because, like, obviously Toonami was airing and stuff was airing on Cartoon Network, etc., etc. But like anime was so like anime like Haruhi, even though like as explosively popular as it was in Japan, was like such a niche thing in the West. You had to just like go and find some fan subs in 3 parts on YouTube, and like that really just tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it, about how old I am? Yeah. It's funny because Haruhi actually, when I think about the way it looks, even though like season 2 I think looks a lot more like sort of KyoAni's like K-On! Style, um, it has this kind of it has a lot of character to it as just a piece of animation. Like
Mhm.
it it just feels like anime doesn't, like, a lot of anime doesn't necessarily get made that way anymore, right? It feels like
Yeah.
it has a certain character to it, and almost like we talked about how much polish it has, but there's almost a certain lack of polish that like gives it this very charming feel. Like it's very approachable, whereas a lot of anime nowadays is either like very kind of not that interesting to watch visually, or is very interesting to watch but is like so polished that it maybe is like it glides over your eyes, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what I love about Studio Trigger's animation so much, is that you can kind of tell who's animating when you're watching it.
Yeah.
And a lot of other anime don't necessarily have that very personal touch to it. Like
Mhm.
Haruhi Suzumiya has a very Kyoto animation feel to it. It's very unique, as a piece of animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean this is like when like digital animation was like the industry standard, right at the start of when digital animation was like the standard, and it still looks really good. Like it still looks like it has the character of being hand drawn. Like it's funny because like all anime is still hand drawn, right? Except for I guess the CG stuff, which there is more of nowadays, and more that doesn't suck. But like it's funny because there is more of a person behind the animation. It feels like, you know.
Rather than having it automated by a program or something.
Right, right. And I think that obviously that has to do with like the lighting and the backgrounds and stuff. I always find it funny when I watch the movie and it's like there's so much more detail because you can tell they just had more time and more budget.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's talk about the sort of last two major arcs of or the two very okay, let's talk about the three very big arcs, right? The first one
Okay.
is the one where Haruhi decides she is done with mundane life and she is going to create a new world unintentionally,
Yes.
and she drags
Yes.
Kyon with her.
Yes.
So this is interesting because not only is this episode like 6, right? It's episode 6 like chronologically too. So in every single time it's aired, it has been like episode 6, and it still feels like an ending episode, which is why some people watch it last.
That's why, like, I legitimately thought that it was an ending episode, and we would, like, when I was watching, I was like, what are we gonna move on to after this? This feels very conclusive, you know, like, I wouldn't have been surprised if they ended it there and they decided to move on to, like, a new cast or something after that, right?
Right. Well, you know what? This is actually kind of funny because I think that the structure of that being like the 6th episode, because I have to assume that this is the way that it happens in the light novels too, where like you have that big dramatic arc where like all of these exciting things are happening, and then you just have a bunch of mundane stuff happening, is responsible for so many light novels doing the exact same thing, where you have like 6 episodes of this really dramatic, interesting arc, and then you have like slice of life for 6 episodes. Have you noticed this?
I don't know if I consume as much light novel content as you,
Well,
but
Well, like think about one of the most, I think, like I want to say egregious examples of this is Oresuki, right? Do you remember how like for 3 episodes, like 3 to 6 episodes, it was this super dramatic story where like people were being betrayed left and right, and then afterwards it was like mostly just slice of life.
Yeah,
I think that's Haruhi's fault.
I mean, you're probably right. I'm just trying to think about whether I like that or not.
Well, that's the thing, right? Some people copy something without knowing why it works. In Haruhi, it works because the entire series is about the importance and the fantasy of slice of life, whereas in other series, it has different implications. In Oresuki, I don't think it really does anything, except for maybe in the context of what I think this does in Oregairo, or my love comedy Snafu, which is also one of my favorite sort of school series, because that also follows a very similar format where you have a lot of very dramatic arcs back to back, and then you kind of coast on slice of life for a while. And in that, I think it has to do with, I suppose, rewarding the main character for conforming to society, etc., that kind of stuff. And which is not necessarily the case in Haruhi. It is to a certain extent, obviously, because Haruhi is quote unquote coming down. But no, I think as a dramatic arc, it's very interesting because a lot of very exciting things are happening all at once. And it comes to a head where Haruhi and Kyon, basically, the thing that is tying Haruhi to the existence is her relationship with Kyon, and how much, you know, she likes him, obviously, because they kiss at the end, right? And even though she doesn't remember any of it the next morning, she still has her hair up in the ponytail, meaning that they kind of still, it had an effect on her, right? It affected her her sort of character and her mental state. And that's kind of where the Sekai Kei is, right? Where the relationship between these characters is what causes the world to return to normal. But that also, what happened during that arc affects the characters moving forward, right? And it's funny because you can tell in the rest of the series that Haruhi is a little bit more upset with Kyon when he's getting like kind of like touchy with other, you know, characters.
Yeah, it makes more sense in that sense.
Right.
Like we wouldn't understand as much why she gets like that.
Right. It's nice because it's this little character tick that changes.
Yeah.
But is a clear indication that things have not stopped moving and that these characters are still growing.
Yeah. I think another reason why that format kind of works for Haruhi Suzumiya is because the beginning arc establishes all the roles and all the characters and stuff like that, and then it culminates into such a big, dramatic resolution. You feel like the slice of life afterward is really earned, and you want that for Haruhi, because you don't want her to freaking have to recreate the world all over again.
Sure. And I think it, honestly, I think it works better, right? Like, I don't think Haruhi Suzumiya as a series would have worked as well if it was just sort of back-to-back incidents where, like, Haruhi is doing the world ending again, right? At a certain point, the world ending doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's not gonna. But it is important when it happens once or twice because it is doing things to her as a character. And, like, the next big time we see that, right? Because, like, that arc really just kind of establishes the main relationship between Haruhi and Kyon and why that's so important, right? And then the rest of the show carries it through. Because when we get to Endless Eights, there's another kind of world, quote-unquote, world ending, right? Like a failure state, I guess, if you were thinking about it in video game terms.
Right.
Moment where time cannot progress forward because she doesn't want summer to end.
Yeah.
And that is interesting to me for a lot of other reasons. Specifically because it is time to talk about Endless Eights. Endless Eights is one of the most maligned arcs in all of anime history. It was so infamous for upsetting people who were fans of the show that the show producers apologized. They made a public apology because it was so poorly received, right? Because Endless Eights is... I'm not kidding you when I say it is 8 episodes of the same narrative beats, right? It is the same summer told 8 different times. Which is fine in a light novel and fine in manga because those can happen 8 times in a much shorter amount of time than it can in an anime. But in an anime, and people suspect that the reason they did this was because of a couple reasons, right? Because there was not as much light novel out. Like they didn't want to make filler content, even though they kind of ended up making filler content in a way. But also because like season 1 came out in a weird order, right? And I think it was because they did not know if they were going to be greenlit for a season 2. But the original airing order of season 1 is all over the fucking place. It starts with the adventures of Mikuru Asahina, which is the culmination of the school arc, of the school festival arc,
right?
Which happens in season 2, mind you,
right?
So that's the first episode, because it narratively establishes the role of each of the characters in their kind of like supernatural existence, right? Actually, I have to say kudos to like the way it was put together, because for an anime that wasn't like, if they didn't know it would get a second season, they put it together very, very well thematically. But not even remotely chronologically. Things happen all over the place. We skip like 6 months into winter, and there's just no explanation for that. And but when you watch it, you don't notice it because you're just like, oh, this is vaguely chronological. Like this makes sense, I guess. And by the time you reach the end of the season, you forget that you even watched the adventures of Mikuru Asahina, and you're like, where did this come from again? I don't understand. And then you're like, oh wait, yeah. Like if you watch it chronologically, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I watched it chronologically, so it made sense to me. But
correct.
And I remember you telling me while we were watching Endless Eights that the school movie is the first episode of the whole series.
Yup.
But so they held off on showing you the making of the movie until
the after 2? Endless Eights, yes.
Like broadcasting wise?
Well, just production wise. They made the
yeah. Well, I mean, when they broadcasted it, when did they broadcast the making of the movie?
After Endless Eights.
Oh my god!
Yeah. So it was the farthest possible point between those two sort of pieces that it could have been.
Oh my
Anyway,
god.
So yes, part of the reason that season 2 had 8 episodes of Endless Eight was undoubtedly because they spent some of season 2 material in season 1. So anyway, but here's the thing about Endless Eight is revisiting it now, right? It's very interesting, artistically very interesting, at least to me. I explain this a lot, but like, I kind of love it, right? I kind of love the fact. Okay, I want to put this into context. The first time I watched Endless Eights was when it was airing, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but imagine imagine you're in the middle of summer, you're having a good time, you're like 13 years old, so nothing fucking matters, and every week on like Sunday or whatever day it was, you're like, oh boy, a new episode of Haruhi Suzumiya, my favorite anime, and for 8 straight weeks it was the same episode.
I feel like people probably destroyed some TVs at that point, you know, like
I 100% like sympathize, and I empathize with those people who really, really disliked it, because my god, it was soul crushing as a kid to watch that. But now 10 years later, as an adult watching it back, it's one of the most fascinating art choices that has ever been made in an anime.
You can appreciate the having watched a lot of anime now at this point, you can appreciate how different of a decision that they made.
Yeah, right? Like, there is nothing else like Endless Eights. Nothing at all, right? Like, there's other anime about time traveling, like The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Madoka Magica, I'm sure another one, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. I guess maybe the Evangelion reboots if you're counting.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe the Evangelion movies.
But that's kind of ambiguous anyway. But like,
yeah,
absolutely nothing does it like Haruhi Suzumiya does it. Because imagine if nowadays you were like, I want to make an anime where 8 episodes in a row, airing weekly, are the same episode.
I think I wonder. Okay, so when did they produce Endless Eights?
Probably like 2009.
Okay, so they at this point would have had a decent amount of success from the original.
Oh, yeah, it would have been
airing.
explosive. People were doing the fucking Hare Hare Yukai all over the place.
Right. And so then they would have been able to then fund Endless Eights and make it, because there's no way that an investor in their right mind would fund this.
No,
right?
Of course not.
Without any kind of pretense.
It was funded because it was so, like, season 1 was so absolutely unequivocally popular.
Right. They were like, oh, there's no way you could do any wrong. We'll just fund whatever you want.
It was the anime of 2006, right?
Right.
And
okay. I mean, one of the reasons why you have to consider why there's nothing else that exists like this is because common sense dictates that this shouldn't exist.
Well,
and so then you wonder.
Here's the thing. The only reason that nothing like this exists nowadays is because people looked at Endless Eights and they were like, that's marketing suicide. Nobody would ever greenlight anything like this ever again.
Right. But people would have done that if Endless Eights had come out on its own, right? Without the first season, and they were like, we want to make an anime arc about this specifically. People would have said no.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it's Haruhi, and like, it's part of the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie to you. Honestly, you can get the experience of Endless Eights just by watching the 3 episodes, like the bookend episodes and just one in the exact middle, right?
Yeah.
Like, realistically, you get the idea. Yeah. But, and this is a but.
Here we go.
I am coming out as an Endless Eights apologist. I think the existence of Endless Eights is brilliant. I don't necessarily think it was a smart idea, financially. But my god, artistically, it sure, like, okay, so here's the thing, right? We oftentimes think about media in ways where we wish that they gave us other experiences besides pure entertainment, right? This is something that
Do
comes
we?
up well, this is something that comes up in video games a lot, right? Where like when you think of something as art and not simply as entertainment, it means that you are expecting the expectation of it is that it can deliver you experiences that are not necessarily purely enjoyable. And that is something that we kind of crave, right? There is a reason
Okay.
Well, there is a reason why tragedies are such a popular enduring genre of theater, right? Like
Right, but I
there's
would. It kind of like, to me, tragedies also falls under the umbrella of quote unquote entertainment. But that might
right.
not. That might not fit the strict definition of entertainment because it's meant to be
Yeah.
enjoyable.
But there's a kind of like there is a kind of shall we say like artistic movement about not necessarily delivering enjoyable experiences, right? Like if somebody set up an art exhibit that was meant to make you uncomfortable, like that's the idea, right? The idea is to make you feel uncomfortable. Something for example, like being in an anechoic chamber where like you can't hear any sound and suddenly your own body starts to tear itself apart and you have to get out of there before you go bad. So um there's like that kind of stuff. There is obviously a lot of art surrounding very traumatic events, you know, stuff like the Holocaust and other sort of genocides, where a lot of art created around that is not for entertainment. It's to make you feel sympathy or empathy, or to make you feel uncomfortable about the things that humanity has done, right? Like I think there's like a I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot of sort of art exhibitions and pieces that are like this, that are meant to make you feel uncomfortable. In sort of in the game world, one of the most kind of now well-known examples of this is Pathologic and Pathologic 2 as sort of byproduct of that. But Pathologic is an experience that is extremely not enjoyable, but it makes you feel what, like it sets out to make you feel despair, and you do feel despair, and
Uh-huh.
amongst a lot of other things. Yeah. I mean, the reason that people know about Pathologic now is because resident of the internet H Bomber guy made a 2 hour long video about it. As
Uh-huh.
most things, you know, whenever something gets a sudden bump, it's probably because there's an H Bomber guy video coming out about it. But like that's the thing that to me strikes me the most about Endless Eights, is that the primary things I feel, aside from, you know, kind of like the mind-numbing feeling of
Oh
watching
my
the same events
god.
happen over and over again, is
Yeah.
um that kind of boredom and that feeling of being trapped, and empathy for Yuki Nagato, who has to watch this happen 15,000 times, right?
Yeah. I I understand your argument about like how this could be interpreted as a work. I mean, it is. It is a work of art because it helps you experience something outside of yourself. Essentially, it
Hmm.
helps you feel an
Yeah.
emotion or tap into an emotion that you knew was there, but you weren't feeling it currently until you experienced the work of art. And so it definitely falls into that. Especially if you have any kind of sympathy towards Yuki Nagato. If you didn't before, you do now.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and this is the brilliant thing about it, right? Which is that, and I don't, I honestly like, I wouldn't be able to tell you if any of this was intentional at all, because I mean, they made 8 fucking episodes that cover the same events, so like, I don't know. I feel like most normal logic goes out the window when you have something like this, but like, the kind of amazing thing about Endless Eights, the Endless Eights arc, if you watch it all the way through, um And obviously, if you maybe want a less painful experience, you can experience it with us. If you're
and you listen to our pain and feel better.
We can suffer together, right? But it's it makes you feel empathy for Yuki Nagato because you get to see her perspective, but they don't tell you that. At least not necessarily as explicitly as they could, right? When you feel that, you begin to realize it on your own, and you know what that feeling is because you are literally experiencing it as you watch.
I would say, even though they did reproduce the same episode 8 times, that it was very intentional that they wanted you to experience things from Nagato's perspective, because the way that they wrote her in these episodes as the only one who is aware of what's happening, and she's keeping count each time of what event is happening.
Right.
And Kyon goes to her for answers, and then suddenly is too overwhelmed to even comprehend and tells her to stop telling him things.
Right.
Like, I think they definitely had that in mind. They just didn't realize how much ire it would produce from the fandom.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
we can say that they certainly made a choice, and I respect them for making a choice.
Yes, I also respect them for making a choice, even though that choice also soured me on the
Yeah,
series.
I could tell you were dying. You thought we were in for 3 episodes. Nope, 8 episodes. 8 fucking episodes.
It should have been 3!
We can cover, you can cover what happens in 3 episodes, but nothing quite beats watching all 8 to experience the full Yuki Nagato sympathy arc.
I think this is also like a general. It fed into the feeling of what I generally have a problem with in slice of life anime, is that they're a little too willy nilly with their time because it's supposed to be mundane,
right.
life, that sometimes they take too many liberties with how they spend their time, and I don't appreciate that, because I appreciate, tighter writing than that, basically. And you can have a slice of life anime that is very intentional with its pacing, but it feeds into the narrative that they're trying to produce, and sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so it felt like you could have condensed it. Like, you could have probably still had it happen 8 times within that 3 episode time span or whatever, and not have it feel as wasteful.
Yeah. I mean, I can't honestly fault them too much, considering the fact that it seems like it was a I'm not gonna say it was an artistic choice, because it really might have just been sort of an economical choice, right? It might have just been the most pragmatic thing they could have done. Like, obviously, if you don't want to write filler content, the best thing that could possibly have fallen into your lap when you don't have material to adapt is a time loop arc, right? Like, that is a blessing from God. Jesus descended from the heavens to hand you this. Just like, have at it, right?
But I feel like even if they didn't have time, common sense again would dictate, we'll change things like slightly between episode to episode.
But I love it because they don't use common sense going into it. But okay, in the defense of Endless Eights, if you actually watch every episode, there are no reused shots whatsoever. They animate every single episode.
They animate every single scene differently.
They've changed the pacing ever so slightly between episodes. They changed the directing. They have new shots, and everyone is wearing different clothing. It's honestly like there is no argument to be made that it was a decision made to be lazy, right? Like, no part of this was lazy whatsoever, because they put the work in, and it looks like they did if you watch them back to back to back like we did. If you watch it week to week, oh my holy okay. I legitimately understand, but like, there's actually nothing in the world will ever compare to watching it week to week. Like, and this is an argument that Pause and Select, the YouTube channel, makes in kind of the and I talked about this to I mentioned this to you when we were watching the Endless Eights, but Full Moon wo Sagashite when it was coming out was one sort of episode or chapter, I don't remember which one it was, a week, and each chapter or episode covered a week of real time. And so over the course of a year of watching or reading a series, you are watching and experiencing in real time a character going towards her death in real time, right? There is something kind of amazing about that experience that you will never get unless you do it purposefully. And you would never do that purposefully, because why would you, right? Like, no person would ever watch Endless Eights week to week nowadays unless they were really just masochistic, right? Like, I wouldn't do it, right? I sat through Endless Eights the first time, week to week, and it made me quit Haruhi Suzumiya. Like, I got all the way through Endless Eights, I watched a couple episodes of the next arc, and then I just stopped watching it. Like, I just couldn't watch anymore. I don't know what it was, I just stopped. But
I would have stopped too, honestly.
I'm amazed, actually, because now that I think about it, I did make it through Endless Eights week to week. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, if I was you, I would have stopped. I would have been upsetty spaghettis. I would have quit the anime forever.
But then we watched it all the way through recently for the podcast episode.
For the podcast.
And now that I've done that, I might never have to do it again. I don't think I want to do it again.
I hope you don't do it again.
I don't think I'm going to do it again. I don't know, maybe check with me in a decade. I might have different feelings about the whole affair.
Oh no.
But, like, you know, it's certainly an experience. And okay, and I'll sort of bring this around so that, you know, we're not here for 3 hours, because that would be impossible to edit. I would enter a sort of Endless Eights of my own, right?
Yes, you would.
The entire point of the Endless Eights arc is about how special things, when they become like rote, like when they become pattern and not special anymore because they're happening all the fucking time, lose all meaning whatsoever, right?
Yes.
The entire kind of thing about this arc was the fact that Haruhi does not want summer to end because she's not satisfied with her summer, and she feels like they didn't do enough, even though they were doing stuff every day. And it takes an extra little push to say, hey, we can spend that last day doing something that isn't fun, but we're going to be doing it together. And that's very important, because it is kind of another moment where you see Haruhi growing up as a human being, and as a kind of a coming of age thing, where this person who just wants to have fun things happen all the time has to experience this transition from the fun thing ending to the other things that are not as fun starting, right? And in a way, it is obviously about, like, a high schooler who doesn't want summer break to end. God knows, like, I was in high school for 4 years.
Right.
I never wanted summer to end. Like, it really is like that. But, you know, like, and, you know, this is obviously explored in stuff like 500 Days of Summer or whatever. But, like, when those things become so rote, they lose all meaning, and they're not special anymore. And it is the ending of those things that gives them the meaning, right? Not necessarily the things just happening by themselves, especially if they're happening over and over again. And in an interesting way, it's both a metaphor for youth, right, as a thing that will eventually end and will have been special, maybe, but will not be special if you stay within it forever, right? Maybe you'd want to spend a little bit of extra time there, but it has to come to an end eventually, and you have to grow up and become an adult, which is kind of depressing to hear, but right? But it's also, like, about death, right? You can't be alive forever. You can't experience being alive forever. Eventually, you will die, and the death of you is what gives your life meaning. The fact that you will eventually cease your biological functions gives the things that happen to you and are interpreted through your meat brain, that's what makes them important and special, because they're happening to you and you're experiencing them, and they're making you feel certain things about the world. You're interpreting them, right? And
yeah,
it's amazing to me that is thematically what I'm drawing from the Endless Eights arc, and it's something that they never say, ever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? They're just like, okay, cool. Now that we want to spend the last day together doing homework, we're done. We're done with the time loop, right? And Haruhi like really chills the fuck out after that. Well, okay, not necessarily, because she still has to go through the whole film thing, and there's definitely a point where Kyon gets fed the fuck up. But like,
bro, that we gotta talk about that arc.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think is one of the most uncomfortable arcs for certain people, because it is so focused around the actual ramifications of what it's like to be Haruhi Suzumiya's friend.
Because it was alright, so watching this now, you have to kind of watch it in the lens of like, okay, well, there were certain things that were in fashion in writing, quote unquote.
Correct, yes, absolutely.
That were popular in the early 2000s that are not popular now. And so one of those things was 100,000% how they treat Mikuru's character.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The fact is that I don't necessarily even have a problem with Mikuru as a character. I think it's cool that she's a time traveler and that there's an adult version of her, etc., etc., but the writing around her is so uncomfortable that it makes me a little crazy, and it was like the most disliked thing about the show that I had about it personally was because it didn't center, but it was such a huge part of the show was Haruhi forcing Mikuru into all of these things that she clearly doesn't consent to, but she does anyway because she isn't able to stand up for herself, or chooses not to stand up for herself because she doesn't want to piss off Haruhi, who is the creator of the world,
who is God,
so on and so forth. Yeah, and so that's such a huge part of the show, but I moved past it because I decided, it's an early 2000s show. I just gotta, I have to accept that that's what it is.
There are certain things about the show for sure that are of the time period. One of the most kind of prominent ones being Haruhi Suzumiya as a character. Because the thing about Haruhi Suzumiya is that many of a lot of what she does is informed by very niche communities in Japan at the time. Like this is the thing, right? Is that Haruhi is in many ways almost a stand-in for like the otaku figure, where she knows about like moe appeal and like Akihabara and like bunny girl appeal and nurse appeal and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a lot of writing in Haruhi Suzumiya as a whole that feels like, especially in the early, I think this is mainly a problem in like much of the earlier stuff, right?
Yes.
And it kind of, from the sounds of it, chills out a little later, but like it's very much like a novel written by a nerdy dude in 2003.
Yeah, and so the low light of the arc is that it does really come to a head in the Sigh of Haruhi Suzumiya, but what I really respect the show for is that they address the fact that one of their biggest bits is really uncomfortable because it blurs into lines of consent and what's okay to do with your friends and what's not. Like, how does Haruhi actually see and treat her friends? Does she see them as friends, or does she see them as objects? Right. And that line gets really blurred, especially with Mikuru. And so I do like the fact that Kyon, as our point of view character, confronts her about that, but you also have to consider the fact that he's very biased towards Mikuru, and he also there is a little bit of a debate within him whether he actually enjoys what Haruhi does to her or whether he's against it.
Right.
He does that throughout the show. But ultimately, he decides that he's going to stand up for Mikuru and, and it's so uncomfortable.
It is
but I really liked that they had that confrontation. Yeah. And then the way that it resolves pissed me off.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, because it doesn't really. And
it doesn't. It doesn't.
and I will say this, like, that scene is really great because it employs that same thing that Toradora does, where like it's like a little too real for a moment. You're like, oh god, oh Jesus, oh no.
Yeah, I felt my blood pressure rising. I was like, oh no.
I was so highly uncomfortable. I was like, I hate confrontation. This is the worst. Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. But again, I do respect the writing going and being like, you know, we gotta look at this as it is, that Haruhi probably would go a little too out of control in this kind of situation, and Kyon is always the person who tries to reel her back and levy her expectations a little bit. And that's where that really manifested. And boy, did it bother me that everyone put it back on Kyon to approach Haruhi, even though Haruhi was the one who was in the wrong. They were both in the wrong, technically, because he was about to hit her.
Yeah, no, that was like, Kyon, stop.
Yeah, but
Right.
I definitely
You can't
did
hit
not
your
like
friends.
the fact that he had to approach her to reconcile, and she didn't even look like she was apologetic, even though she was like kind of secretly doing the ponytail thing, like she wanted to maybe make up with him. She ultimately didn't make any effort towards it, you know. She just kind of received Kyon's words and then they made up.
Right. I think in all fairness, like,
Yeah.
the entire series is kind of has always been this negotiation between Haruhi and Kyon, and like,
Yes.
like he kind of acts as the moral guidance. Like, if we think about the and this is, oh god, this is the most like literature ass thing I'm gonna say. I promise.
Here we go.
all podcast long. I promise this is the most literature thing I'm gonna say. But like, there is a very Freudian kind of contention between Haruhi as the id and Kyon as the super ego, where
Yeah.
where a lot of Haruhi's impulses are tempered by Kyon, and
Right.
that's a very important part of being a person, is having both of those things. Because and like, let's just like roll right into it, right? Like, that's like the thing about the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, is that what happens when Kyon doesn't have Haruhi, right?
Yes.
And it more explicitly talks about like this relationship that they have and the negotiation that they have than the rest of the series, where without like Kyon, Haruhi would sort of run amok. But without Haruhi, Kyon doesn't do anything. He doesn't have anything that he cares about, really. And lives kind of this like like obviously mundane, but like this kind of like listless, depressed life.
Right. Like a very sloth-like life where
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
he kind of just settles and that's it.
He complains a lot about Haruhi dragging him all over the place, but he secretly enjoys it because otherwise he wouldn't do anything. Haruhi is responsible for many of the important relationships that Kyon builds that, you know, make his youth so fulfilling, right? Like, if we think of Haruhi and Kyon as one person, you know, you can't just have temperance, you also have to have the desire to actually do things, because temperance without, you know, desire is just depression. Right? You know?
Yeah, I think in that case, a person like Kyon would either, you know, have that long inactive depression, or would probably seek out chaos in a really unhealthy way because he doesn't have, you know, a frequent quote-unquote healthy source of it, if you could say that Haruhi was a healthy source of it.
And the thing about it is that, like, when you get to this other universe, this other created universe where Haruhi Suzumiya does not have godlike powers, and nobody has supernatural existence, they're all just normal people, Kyon is the one who, out of everybody, believes the most in those things, like, in a sort of twist, right? And we see Haruhi in this universe who is just so sad. Like, she just decided to listen to the adults in her life, and she went to, the school that would be best to get into college. And
Yeah.
it's just utterly miserable to watch a
Yeah.
character that we know to be this kind of hyperactive, motivated person that does all of these, fun things because she wants to have fun with her friends, to just listlessly going to school with like the one person who was maybe interesting but really isn't actually, when you really think about it.
Right. It I do really like the way that the movie kind of, if you were like me and your sympathy for Haruhi really took a dip after the Sigh of Haruhi Suzumiya, the movie more than makes up for,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
you like reminding you why Haruhi is such a needed presence in the
Right,
story.
because she's
and I mean,
because she's important to Kyon.
Yes, exactly.
Like, Kyon cannot exist as he does without Haruhi. That's a very important part of who he is as a person now, and the kind of enjoyment that he finds in his life, right? He's having fun. And this is the fun thing. This is like the funny thing about like slice of life fantasy, is a lot of the fantasy of slice of life is just having friends. Like, I'm not even gonna beat around the bush there. Really, like, realistically, even a lot of school stuff derivative of Haruhi is just about having friends, right?
Yeah.
And like, it's kind of understated, but like it's such a vital part of what makes that existence so fun and fulfilling, is having people to share it with, right? When Kyon realizes that, he's not in his universe, he can still probably live out Kyon could live just a perfectly adequate life with Haruhi in this universe, and Koizumi, and Asahina, and a Nagato Yuki that is just a person who is interested in him and is like just kind of a shy, bookish person. And he realizes that he doesn't necessarily just want, that he wants the existence that he was having before, the one where Haruhi is dragging him into fun things. He wants to be with the people who he shares memories with. And like, I mean, I think that's important, obviously. There is an entire sort of alternate universe spin-off called The Disappearance of Yuki Nagato, who that is where he just stays in this universe and he forges a relationship with Yuki Nagato, which is,
wait, really?
Yeah, which is, I mean, cathartic in some other ways, because you're like, oh, I love Yuki Nagato, she's the best character, etc., etc.
Yeah, she was Big Moe in the movie.
She's Big Moe in the
alternate
movie.
Yuki.
And it's funny because, like, when you really think about it, that is the idealized version, the idealized human version of Yuki Nagato, because that's the universe that she creates for herself. Right?
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of like the thing about the entire movie, is that Kyon is going through all this stuff, and he's like having a real hard time adjusting to an actual normal sort of life. But the most, like, the central kind of thing about The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya to me is not about Haruhi Suzumiya, which is funny because most of the series isn't necessarily about Haruhi Suzumiya. But it's about Yuki Nagato, and
it is.
The displeasure that she feels in her current role, and how much she wants to continue to be like a part of Kyon's life and the rest of the SOS Brigade's life. Like, the club is the keys. Like, the club needed to be gathered for the choice to be given to Kyon, even to
right. Well,
normal.
Right. Well, the conflict, I like that it occurred after the whole Endless Eight nonsense, and then also the Sigh of Haruhi Suzumiya, which Yuki also helped mitigate by keeping Haruhi's powers from, lasering Kyon through the forehead or whatever. Is the stress that built up from her having to do all that to manage the god of creation or whatever, right? And that she ultimately decides that the world is better off with Haruhi not having her powers, and then sending Haruhi off to a completely different school and separating the brigade altogether. But then there's still that part of her that thinks of Kyon as something different and has him choose which reality is better.
Well,
Um,
I think that's also really great because, like, a lot of the things in the series, it's really sort of up to Kyon, but like as much as Kyon kind of makes things happen and tempers Haruhi, like it is Yuki Nagato who actually physically enacts those things. And
exactly.
and like this is something that is mentioned in the movie where he's just like, I just kind of started to assume that you could just take care of it, and
Yep.
that was the dumbest thing I could have done.
Yep.
And it's this amazing moment where not only do we get this great humanizing moment for Yuki, which is just, me, I'm a sucker for any time like a like
Yeah.
robotic kind of character is just like, I'm discovering humanity. Like I'm
Yes.
just such a I'm just such a sucker for that, right?
Yes.
But like not only is it a great moment for that, it's a great moment of character growth for Kyon, who has until now kind of been treating Yuki Nagato as a special existence outside of Haruhi and kind of, the club as a whole, right? Where like after that he kind of treats her more like one of the club members and less like, the sort of caretaker.
Right. I completely agree. The conflict, the central conflict of the movie and how that resolves between Kyon and Yuki is so well written because you feel sympathy for both sides. Like you as a human being, if you were in the situation and you were confronted with the fact that there's a god in your midst who can literally remake the world at any moment just because of her mood, and then you have another alien existence who seemingly has near unlimited power, and is able to fix everything, you would naturally want to lean on that alien existence,
Right.
because that existence also has an interest in making sure that the world doesn't get remade over and over again.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you understand how Yuki feels because you went through the Endless Eights arc.
Right. You went through 15,000 loops. I'd be a little upset.
Yeah.
But I mean, like...
So I think it does great to tie that all together.
Yeah. And I think, like, that is one of the most, like, heartbreaking scenes in the entire series. This, like, moment where... Like, and it's, my God, it's such a good scene. Like, the voice acting is Tomokazu Sugita, delicious. Oh, so good, so good. Like, Kyon is ready to just throw hands with himself. It's just amazing. But, like, it is this great culmination scene for the entire, like, it is this great, like, climax moment for the entire series where Kyon has to kind of choose between, a world that will be comfortable for him, but, doesn't have the people who he has made memories with, but has similar people who he could make memories with, including a Yuki Nagata who he could form a real relationship with. But he's still just drawn to the people that he has been making memories with, and he wants to continue to be with those people, and that's a completely understandable impulse. Like, when you see that choice laid out before Kyon, you kind of think about it, and you're just like, I don't know what I would choose, right? And it's heartbreaking because this is like the culmination of Yuki Nagato's frustration because she wants so badly to be treated as a part of the world, and she's stuck in the role of an observer. And it's funny because in that way we're kind of put in that same position where we look at this fantasy, this slice of life fantasy, and we're Yuki Nagata. We're like, I want to be part of this world. I want to be part of this brigade. There is almost certainly a reason why Haruhi Suzumiya was so popular and why SOS Brigades just popped up all around the world, because people wanted to believe so strongly in this idea because it was so powerful, right? And again, you're in that position of Yuki Nagato where you're like, I want to be here. I want to be a part of this, but I'm stuck as an observer. And it's this great moment where you feel sympathy and empathy for her without them ever explicitly telling you to.
Yeah.
You're just put into Yuki's shoes more often than not, and you can see those moments of frustration building up, and those moments where she's acting a little bit more human than her programming, is supposed to allow. And Like, it shouldn't be a surprise, but like human beings will socially bond to fucking anything. Have you ever seen the way people treat Roombas?
Yeah.
Like anything vaguely that we can project human characteristics onto, we will. Like, I think
Yes.
because we're such social creatures, there is an element of humanity that will always just be lonely. And
Yeah.
there is so few pieces of media that I think isolates you in such a way that you feel that loneliness like deep inside than Haruhi Suzumiya does. And I think that's why it resonates so powerfully with with the audiences that it does. That's why it's so wildly popular to this very day. I mean, God, people are still doing Hare Hare Yukais because the new book is coming out. People, like, these are latent memories within people's bodies. Like, yeah, like before the Chika dance, there was the Hare Hare Yukai.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that the movie so like beautifully the way that the things that he says to Yuki, saying like how they would go and fight the entity for her if they decided to try and erase Yuki's existence. And all the things that he says to her to make her feel necessary and needed and wanted, were I almost teared up. I was like, oh my god.
It's good. Like,
it's so good.
All of the buildup of the series, even stuff you didn't know was happening, especially if you come off of 8 episodes of Endless Eights, I tell you. Like, you feel it.
Yeah, no, it was... Oh my god. The baby Yuki.
Baby Yuki. Yeah. Honestly, I feel a compulsion to go back and read through the Disappearance of Yuki Nagato, just because, like, Nagato deserves something,
Bro, that scene where he was like going through the turnstile or whatever, and then Yuki is like holding on to him, and then he slips out of her grasp because he chooses to go to his old world and leave her behind, like the alternate Yuki. I was like, oh my god. Now I know why they made a whole spin-off series.
It's legitimately like, there's enough material there because of, the sort of culture that is built around Yuki Nagato, the kind of memory that is Yuki Nagato. And I don't know. There's something very special about Yuki Nagato's character in Haruhi Suzumiya, because, like, despite the fact that she's not necessarily the main character or the narrator, she occupies a role that is so vastly different from the other 2 brigade members that aren't Haruhi or Kyon, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like, don't get me wrong, obviously there are certain things about for instance, Asahina that are interesting. Like, there is that little tidbit in one of the episodes where Koizumi mentions, like, he's just like always faking his smile, so you never really know how he's feeling.
Koizumi has such strong Akechi vibes. Like, I swear Akechi was somehow
he's got
like
them
modeled after
vibes.
Koizumi. Bro.
You're not wrong. He definitely has those vibes. You know what? Akechi Goro is just a worse Koizumi. That's sad. I mean, yeah, if anyone was gonna heel turn, it was gonna be Koizumi, which is why it's all the more shocking that it's Yuki Nagato.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, Yuki's kind of the bad guy here. I don't know how to feel about that. But
she's Moe.
Right? Like, this is great because it's one of, like, the most brilliant examples of where you can find antagonism without evil.
Yes.
Like, true antagonism without being evil. An obstacle is being presented. A choice is being presented to the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And those circumstances that he's put in are tough, but he's put in them because of other emotions that aren't hatred. Like, they're put there because of things like attachment and love and frustration that those things are not being conveyed properly. And that's kind of like, that's just so much more interesting to me, to be perfectly honest. Like,
yeah, no, I love it.
It's so good. Haruhi Suzumiya is so good at being this incredible, like, weird like secret life drama, while at the same time being a completely mundane slice of life show, while also being incredibly character driven. Right? That's the thing that gives Haruhi Suzumiya such life as a series, is its characters. It would be nothing without the characters and the characterization that is lovingly put into each one of them as members of the SOS Brigade. And it's I miss it still. Right? Like, in a way, like it's such a formative part of me that like ever parting with Haruhi Suzumiya would be like parting with my childhood. And,
that's the true coming of age.
Yeah, I don't know, it's weird stuff. It's like Haruhi is objectively kind of a weird series. Like you would never assume that this would be mainstream popular.
Right.
But it is not only mainstream popular, it's like explosively genre definingly popular.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow. That's amazing. I mean, really it is. Yeah. I think that's it. I think that's
a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think you're right, Renu. Mostly because I'm very hungry and I want to eat food. So why don't we do the old wrap up?
Woo woo woo.
Yeet. Okay. I suppose, who are you and where can we find you on the internet?
Who am I? You can find me, Renu, on the internet at Swandron on Twitch and Tumblr and Twitter. And you can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I currently am streaming commission art, and I'm also currently in a small tiff between an art thief and myself.
Oh, huh.
They are, selling my art on Amazon, and that's not okay, so I gotta deal with that. Yeah, so, update on that probably sometime this weekend on my Twitter.
Damn. Wow, you've made it, Renu. People are stealing your art.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, man, I made it to the big times if people are selling my stuff on, like, Amazon.
Right.
Big yikes.
Yep. Can't get away from it. Can't get away from it, unfortunately. It's just an aspect of life we must all deal with. Anyway.
That's what I'll be up to. I'll be fighting.
I believe in you. You can do your best.
Oh, thank you. How about you, buddy?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. I'm really not up to much on the internet right now, aside from doing the podcast good. So, yeah. That's kind of it. I don't have any exciting news for you or anything. I'm just gonna be in the woods for a week. That'll be interesting. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. This was maybe like a little bit longer than our normal episodes. Although like we didn't even hit the 2-hour 30 mark, so I'm proud that we kept it concise. Because it means less work for me. Anyway, our opening is by Scotty Network and our ending is by Taku Makata. And the patrons we are thanking this, I suppose, month are...
Let's go.
Evan, Cheru, Frostfall, Magpie Mirror Test, Sean, Claire, and Dylan. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
You make the world go round, and you make the subscriptions go burr.
What?
I mean, it is very important that we are able to keep up our anime subscriptions. Although, maybe that's something to talk about for our next episode. Stay tuned. I promise. Now, under fear of death.
Oh no! Don't make promises you can't keep. I keep telling you this.
Under fear of death.
No, no.
I promise you that episode will come out at the end of this month like it should on that Sunday.
Whoa, I don't... Bro, the world is gonna straight up end before that, or we're gonna get caught in a time loop, endless 8 style, before the end of the month.
It's okay. It just means I gotta sit down and do it. Yep. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. We really, really appreciate all of you who continue to give us your support.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
We will see you next time.
See you next time.
さようなら。また明日ね。